You mentioned his name just there, and it's Davide Frattesi, who is a brilliant central midfielder. To put it reductively, but he is one of the loanees that has come down from Serie A. He's on loan from Sassuolo. He's an Italian under 21 international, and what you were saying on how he's also capable of supporting that attack with his runs, and maybe covering where Donati doesn't get forward. I think that speaks absolute volumes, because we watched him at the under 20 World Cup in 2019, and he was arguably one of the best two-way midfield presences at that tournament.
Yeah.
He's very good at linking attacks, but could tuck in if needs be. And when Pinamonti, who is at Inter, and Gianluca Scamacca, who has been linked with Juventus in recent weeks, when they were absent from those games at that World Cup, Frattesi was the driving force. He was the one pulling this team, forward to try and score goals. And I think it's a great find, not even a find. It's a great pickup by Monza to be able to get, I'd say, perhaps one of the more underappreciated 21-year-old and unders from Serie A's sort of glut of talented young players who just perhaps aren't getting the minutes in Serie A. So I think Frattesi is definitely one that I'm a big fan of. His under 20 World Cup teammate Davide Bettella is with Monza on loan from Atalanta, or at least an initial loan. But before I sort of go into a monologue about the under 20 World Cup from years gone by, which, believe me, I will. What are your thoughts been sort of on Frattesi and Bettella?
I like them both. I like Frattesi a lot. And it's no surprise to me that he's come from Sassuolo, who are, producing, or have consistently produced, some of the more interesting Italian central midfielders over the last sort of 4 or 5 years. And you can see the development of Locatelli, but also Stefano Sensi, who I was a big fan of. He is, like you say, he's a I can't remember the expression you used, but he gets forwards and he comes back. I'm sure you put it much more elegantly.
Two-way midfield presence. I think I've got my notes here.
Thank you.
Very Nicolo Barella of him.
Yeah, I think Barella is a great point of comparison, because what you've got there is somebody who does have the tactical intelligence and defensive discipline to tuck inside. It's interesting that in the most recent games, that midfield three of Frattesi, Barilla, and Barberis has been the sort of fairly consistent point of the team. And I think that speaks volumes to their respective qualities. Frattesi is the guy that injects something a little bit different. He is able to push forwards. He's got the technical ability to do something clever. But what I really like about him is that he usually doesn't do something, I say clever, like he doesn't, it's not trickery. There's not a huge degree of inventiveness when there isn't the requirement for it. So he will play the sensible pass, but he'll play it a second or two before most people would. And that's what gives Monza the momentum and the ability to penetrate opposition defences. It's not wild trickery or a piece of skill that leaves you breathless. It's just executing the fundamentals of build-up play at a greater degree of speed and precision than a lot of other players do. And to see that from a player who's only just 21 is incredibly impressive. And he's definitely some. I mean, they don't have the option to buy with him, as far as I understand, in the same way that they do with Bettella. But he's wherever he ends up, I think he's going to be really good. Bettella, I didn't stand out to me quite as much. He does seem like quite an elegant defender. He seems to have a pretty good reading of the ball. He's the one of the Monza back four that likes to step forwards and close space down. So if Monza are playing against a team that's using a centre forward that drops into the space between the lines, Bettella will be the one usually who pushes up onto them, which I guess means that they have confidence in his reading of the game, but also his athleticism to get back into position, which he seems to do pretty well. Sometimes with defenders, it's when you don't notice them that much that they're good. So that's possibly a reflection of that.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's like when the discussion over Harry Maguire, it's gone a bit quiet over the last 3 months, and that's because he's been playing relatively well. But there's no clamouring for when centre halves are just doing their job, and perhaps being unspectacular but spectacularly solid.
Yeah,
Um, so yeah, I mean, Bettella is he's Italian youth international pedigree, but I think as you said, it speaks volumes that they have an option to buy after his loan. But Monza have an option to buy him from Atalanta, Bettella that is, but they don't have one with Frattesi from Sassuolo, because perhaps Sassuolo identify Frattesi as being a Serie A potential player that they themselves can utilise, because he's been at Ascoli and Empoli in Serie B for a few seasons
yeah,
on loan now. So he has that ability. And, the way that he's been playing this season, the team that he's playing in, it kind of feels as though his finale in the lower leagues, for Tessie that is. But Bettella maybe hasn't had as much experience there. And, while I think he's a good enough presence in both boxes to be a solid Serie A defender, maybe bottom half.
yeah.
But, that you, the waters, I think, are quite muddied when you compare sort of the bottom five of Serie A and the top eight of Serie B, because those teams do cycle through every single season. So I mean, Bettella again is an interesting one. I think it's an option, or it might be an obligation, after 2 years. Because he's on a 2-year loan at Monza. So potentially, if they did get promoted, he may be playing in Serie A next season. Frattesi maybe less so if he's staying with Sassuolo. I think that might depend on where Manuel Locatelli goes in the
Yeah.
summer, if there's interest in him.
These are the two clubs that I would trust to have the best handle on their young players' development.
Yeah,
Uh,
oh, absolutely.
out of the Serie A clubs, I think, in terms of Atalanta are perhaps a little bit more savvy at buying young talent from abroad and bringing it through the Primavera system. Sassuolo tend to develop them at home more, but those are the clubs where you look at them and go, in terms of their recent history, they are the most effective at producing good players. So if they've judged that Frattesi is not going to be available in the same way but Bettella is, I think that does say something about those two players.